If the board members want, we can have Sean make a presentation on a specific type of species that he's suggesting for the different landscaped areas and rain gardens. When we have a presentation on
I'd like to see that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Sean Papich of Sean Papich Landscape Architecture, 222 North Street in Hingham. I'm going to bring this a little closer to see if, maybe turn it toward you to see if it works out a little bit better. Do you have a copy of the plan at all? If you were
Landscape plan?
Not,
Just not that.
not the landscape.
don't have one. Okay.
We have one that was submitted a while ago.
Yeah, this copy right here on the back of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can walk you starting from the entry.
Is that different than this one?
So that's at Thomas Platt Road, we have in the replication area. If you look at the vegetation, I guess you would have the plans. I think you do have the plans that show, but they don't have the current ones today. I have this, I just want to make sure, you don't have to.
They don't have them today.
So let me tell you what we put there. The intention, there's a yeah, so there's chart is kind of twofold. One of the things we want to do, obviously, is in any replication area, we want to replicate with indigenous species, and that's really what we did throughout this property. Really, there's nothing that's not indigenous that we put in here. The big piece we did in here, a couple different things. We got some evergreens along this back side of the replication area to try to provide a little bit of screening to this property. The other pieces that we put into that entry area are things you would expect to find: airwood viburnum. These evergreens are actually eastern red cedar. We have swamp azaleas, service barriers. In the low depression, we used a wetland seed mix of the wetlands plants, and that is listed on all the drawings. So we have that's got the typical wetland species done in seed form.
So what I'm looking at here along the road, are those low or those high?
That would all be fairly well. As you get to the back, you're quite a bit of a distance back from the road, down into the depression before you get to any real woody shrubs.
Yeah.
We do have a couple of low stone accent walls. We're going to take some stone from the site that are existing and use some small accent walls right here by where the walkway is. And then also on the corner here where this other basin is. Fairly low, leading up to that, it's really not going to be, it'll just be lawn areas going right up to the basin. And then when you get to the top of the basin, that's when you really start your vegetated areas.
So
But it
nothing
won't
that's
be
going to
anything-
impact site distance?
No,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is a high priority there, absolutely.
Okay.
Certainly. And Deb had that on the plans really clearly for us. Made sure we didn't, landscape architects like to start plans for all the places. So, similar situation on this other side, a much larger, large masses of redwood, dogwood, swamp azalea, again, service berry, overstaying species, swamp white oak, red oak, tupelo again. So we did some of the similar species. You're really going to find those continuing on throughout some of the other areas.
And-
Some of
and-
these base, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just asking about this basin here that's going to contain a fair amount of water for some period of time. Will everything you've used in there is going to survive
Yes, and what we
being
did is-
submerged?
Yeah, it's a good question. Along the edges and on the slopes is where primarily the woody species is located. And we went to two different types of seed mix that we used to really help with erosion control along the slopes. So it's really almost a ground cover in itself. And then in the basin itself is back to the wetland restoration mix. So it's a wetland seed mix. So, well, the funny thing about a lot of these rain gardens, people talk a lot about rain gardens. One of the things when you get into these rain gardens, some of these areas certainly are going to be wetter than others, but rain gardens really have to be able to handle drought also. And that's one thing that a lot of folks don't really understand. So they almost have to be conditions where you have droughty conditions too. And that would be true of some of these pieces. And why don't I talk a little bit about the street trees? Really, we use a native species there too, red maple. It's a pretty good standard one. People call it swamp maple. But red maple is certainly used here all over the place. It's native to the area, but it's also one of the toughest street trees you're ever going to find. So it's one of the best species to ever use. We've had probably more luck with red maple than any other plant whatsoever in terms of trees. It can handle compacted soils, it can handle wet, droughty, or wet conditions, of course, but also droughty conditions too. And in this cul-de-sac island, so to speak, that was one of the issues when we got on board to study what was going on. And what we really used here is primarily herbaceous plant material. So we knew we needed to have it very low or fairly low so that when the fire department, as we talked about, didn't want to see anything that was 3 feet greater than the curb edge of the street. So we're in pretty good shape with the species that we selected there. The one tree we put there along the banks or the lower bank is the sycamore. Thought it was something a little bit different, a little more of an accent, also a native tree. We would keep that limbed up for visible sight distance. Some of the plants we use in there, verbena, asters, again, typical ones we would use. The wetlands plants is a great source for that. There are some other nurseries that also have those available. We found Sylvan's another nursery that has a lot of that available. We have found that there are wetlands plants, so has those in plugs. And then another piece in there, one of the irises. We talk about getting back into these 2 other rain gardens. We did a similar thing. We're going to want to keep that same humidity too. So again, more redwood dogwoods. Inkberry is another one. It's an evergreen that we use. It's a native. It can handle that wet condition. It can handle some drought conditions too. So we use that also in some of these areas. The serviceberry is one that shows up a lot. We use that a lot. We use it again because it's native. Again because it's almost an ornamental tree. We use it in ornamental conditions also, but also because it provides wildlife value essentially. A lot of fruit. Really, most of this will provide a wildlife value. So these rain gardens are more of the same. They do similar sort of plantings, essentially. More of the serviceberry, more of the Joe Pye weed. Sounds like it'd be bad. It's Joe Pye weed. It sounds bad, but it's really more fun. Again, using the wetland seed mix, which we did in each of these areas. Also use more of the iris. One other area that was of great importance was along here. And what we wanted to do there was give you a little bit of a mix. I know we want to use that as a buffer. To plant it up on the edge. There is going to be some natural buffer there anyway. There's already some vegetation. But we wanted to add back some balsam fir, also some red oaks, and some American holly, some native hollies, which you'll find in kind of the understory around here. You get some really large ones too occasionally around here. Along those banks is, again, the restoration mix. So when we see slopes in these areas, affected areas, we use the restoration seed mix from Massachusetts, the wetlands plants from Amherst, Massachusetts. That company, and so that's what you see primarily along this whole bank.
How much watering does that all take?
You know, just like anything, it's going to take a little bit of watering in the initial season. Certainly the seed mix itself can germinate fairly quickly. The thing about a lot of these seed mixes too is there's a native grass component. A lot of people might think of that, they think of it as all wildflowers, when really, primarily it's a native grass element. With most of the seed mixes, if you really look at the recipes that they have, the menu, a lot of it is the native grasses, and those would germinate within a couple of weeks. So you really rely on those to really get the erosion control going. All the other plant material, the forbs, those are very important. But to me, it's still more about the grasses. But
So could you just speak a little bit to the sequencing here? When does it get planted and how long do you have to keep maintaining it? in order to make sure it's established and stays that way?
Now, in terms of planting, seasonal planting will depend upon the schedule of the construction, how that actually takes place. But in terms of establishing the plant material, as soon as it's planted, something maintained over the first year is very, very important. Usually it's a couple of years that you're maintaining this. So,
2 years.
most contractors will give you warranties for 2-year warranties for development of this nature, a project of this size, and that's pretty common.
Sort of along the same lines, the sequence of construction, clearly the street and everything below surface, the grade's got to be in, final grades have got to be done, topsoil's got to be down, all of that, before you do your planting. How does that integrate with the building of the houses themselves? At this point, the houses are not built, but the plantings go in, or do the plantings go in before the houses are built? I guess my concern is if there's damage to the plantings because of activities connected with building the homes, who's responsible for that?
I would say to answer that last question would be the homeowner contractor if they go beyond their limit of work. Ideally, with the, we did prepare an erosion control plan that might help in the process. Switch this up. So as you stated, obviously, really the first thing to do would be to clear and start the road and get the infrastructure in. So what we're proposing to use for the basic limit of work would be a silt sock, which we've had a lot, much more success with than hay bales and silt fence for a lot of reasons. A lot of times the hay bales degrade a lot faster. You also could get invasive species. Silt sock can be installed very quickly and easily, and you do not need to excavate to set it in the ground. It conforms right to the existing contours. So during the road construction, we have that wrapping around the entrance here, and then interim would be up through here so that we don't have any of the sort of undisturbed work or runoff flowing into the work areas. What we also have proposed here is a temporary sedimentation basin, upgradient of the infiltration basin with some added silt sock behind that to secure that this area is protected during construction grading. And this basin would be graded, basically constructed and seeded, and at that time you could probably do the landscaping in the back. All fairly quickly, because you're going to want that basin to be have as much time to get stabilized before you have any runoff there. We have these two sort of wormy lines on the plan are what they call diversion dikes or berms. They're 1 foot high, and basically what it does is it helps us run and direct water. Here we want to direct this water, which is all undisturbed during the road construction, out and around, so that we don't have runoff going across our site again, you know, reintroducing sediment down gradient, as well as this is diverting the work area here to our temporary sedimentation basin. And down at the front, we're utilizing the two sediment forebay areas of the pocket wetland. And the reason for that, ideally, this is the low point as you get to Clap Road, so they're the best locations for the roadway construction. What that'll do is slightly delay the pocket wetland full construction, I guess. They can grade everywhere else. But again, with the construction of the pocket wetland, the intention is that it is intercepted with groundwater. As Sean also mentioned, a lot of the plants can withstand flooding. That's the whole intent of the basin. What I've done in the past in a couple of the other pocket wetlands that I've designed is once the road is stabilized, allow the either the dense gravel subbase or binder, either one, whichever we can get to quickly. Allow water to flow in here into the basin, and then you control that as you finish designing the basin. So it's really a something that during construction has to be worked out with timing, with weather, all of those things.
To be a true rain garden, that soil underlying those areas has got to be what I believe is called engineered soil.
Yes.
So you're going to have to excavate that and put new material back in with a particular sieve size and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a combination sand, organics, let's see if I have that cross-section. That would apply to these 3 rain gardens. Do show that. They're on my desk, I can flip through them really quick. Here's one section, this is the cul-de-sac section here where we're showing that,
Okay.
that media
Yeah.
that needs to be underneath it, which is where you get your treatment.
And does that actually happen after most of the construction around it has occurred, in case there's any kind of sediment buildup or things that you need to
Right,
remove?
you could rough grade some of that, and then you would have to bring that media in that lower portion.
Okay.
Just as a further follow-up to your question, Mr. Vogel, the applicant, Fern Properties, intends to both build the road and then also build the houses as well.
Yep.
And so their expectation is they're going to have the road built and all of the mitigation features in place before they're going ahead and proceeding with the individual lots. And they'll be very aware of the effort, obviously, that went into putting in the mitigation features. So.
Right, I recall that's what we were told, and that's a good situation, obviously. As a follow-on to that, is this construction going to be relatively simultaneous? In other words, will all this be built out in a fairly short window, as opposed to stretched out over, say, a couple of years as the homes are pre-sold? I would guess, and I defer to Mr. Iantosca about this, but I would guess that they'll build them as quickly as they're able to be absorbed into the marketplace. And so if the market is there with people who want to buy all of them quickly within the first year, then the project will be up and it'll be done. If it's somewhat longer absorption, it'll take longer.
And during that particular phase?
But they're definitely not planning on simply going in and clearing all of the lots, en masse. The idea is to have each lot specifically designed for a particular house that a buyer wants.
Okay.
But during that whole phase, how much of the permanent stormwater management, rain gardens and all that are in?
The intent is to have the rain gardens in and functioning while the houses are under construction, yes.
And the sedimentation basin and all that? I mean, not the sedimentation, the retention
Right.
basin?
You could have all of the basins in the rain gardens completed and vegetated. Your road is at binder, and then really, you would just need to make sure maybe you have a silt fence or something, upgradient of those, just so that you don't track any debris from the roadway from traffic. To get
And when does the road get paved?
That would be as soon as possible.
Pretty early in the
They want-
process,
it's-
yeah.
It's a short road, so it should be relatively quick process to do. I think when we were talking, we were thinking a couple of months. I think that's some, but it all depends. Again, it's weather-driven timing.
Excuse me, I'm Joe Iantosca. Obviously, I'm the proponent of this project, but the plan would be, once we were approved, we would go in and put all the infrastructure in place, all the rain gardens, the drainage, the culverts across the street, get the road to binder stage, get all the plantings in with the exception of the street trees, get the utilities in place as far as, national grid, and at that point, we would start with the houses. And my guess would be, depending on whether they're pre-sold or not, would start with the first 2 homes to get the project up and moving. And then as we sell them, we would go forward with the balance of the construction of the remaining lots inside the project. And then at the very end, we would, or towards the end of the house construction, we would finish up with the street trees. We'd prefer to see the binder go through at least 1 winter because of settlement and any other issues that may take place. Raise the basins the following year, and then come in with the finish coat of finished pavement and whatever type of touch-up on the whatever erosion and grass that needs to be replanted, and if any of the trees don't take, replant them.
Yeah, okay.
So when you say binder, what is that?
That would be
What
the
does that
first
entail?
level of pavement. I'm not
Okay.
sure what the cross-section is, whether it's 3 inches.
So it's like the base coat?
The base coat,
The base
correct.
coat.
Yeah, in fact, if you go to Evangeline Drive, it's the binder right now. They're waiting till all those homes are completed before doing the final coat.
I'm used to calling binder something else, so.
Sorry.
All right.
Stucco road.
If the board members don't have further questions about the subjects we've just addressed, I'll jump into the next topic that we have for tonight, which is the conservation parcel footpath.
Before we do that, I think what I'd like to do is to see if Dave will have any input or any comments of where we are now, so that we have a fresh in them up.
We reviewed the revised plans, and we've been in conversation with the design engineer to resolve some of the items that were included in our original letter. And I think the board has had a copy of our final letter. Essentially, the last paragraph sums it all up, and that we've adequately addressed our comments contained in the initial letter. And we consider at this point our review plans to be complete.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions on the specific responses that we had, that they had to our initial comment, we'd be glad to answer any of those.
Anything more? No, that's good, thank you. Laura, do you want to chip on before we?
Yeah, I guess I'll hold off on anything to do with the open space, since it sounds like that's what hasn't been talked about yet. But just briefly to go back over some of the issues and bring everyone up to speed with where things are. As far as the habitat and the rare species protection, we talked about that quite a bit with Mr. Wells, who was here at the last meeting. The Conservation Commission is going to be hiring an expert to look at the buffer to those vernal pools. The Conservation local bylaw has a potential 250-foot protection area around the vernal pools. And there's a 125-foot no-touch zone, which this development is completely clear of. But then there's another 125 feet, which I think there's been some discussion at the Conservation Commission about whether that should also be a no-touch zone or not. So they're going to be getting someone who's an expert in that area to really evaluate that. I think it's going to be a little difficult to get to the final stages of the plan as far as even the conventional density sketch plan until those things are known. That's just my opinion.
How soon will that happen?
That's going to be towards the end of October.
Patty, you can chip in here if you want.
Yes, we put out the RFP for a specialist to go out and to start by meeting with the people from Natural Heritage and with Dan Wells, who did the turtle report. And we're asking for this report to be completed by the 24th of October. And then our next hearing is the 28th of October, Monday. And at that time, we'll probably also be bringing Dave Johnson back in to go through some of the stormwater issues that apply to, more to the conservation concerns about wetlands, about, where stockpiles going to be located, and erosion controls and compaction of basins. So we'll be going through some of those same things with Dave, because commission members haven't heard all of that.
Good, super, thank you.
The only other thing, as far as the vernal pools, there was some discussion a little bit earlier about the water balance. And, you know, maybe we can kind of get an update on that, where that goes.
We had asked the design engineer to provide an analysis and calculations of the impacts of this development on the water balance to the vernal pool. We don't want to see water being interrupted and intercepted to cause the vernal pool to dry up, nor do you want to see so much water going there that it becomes unusable by the creatures that use it for breeding and habitat. So they did provide to the planning board a letter summarizing that analysis. We've looked at that at kind of a macro level. We didn't reinvent the wheel, but based upon what we know of this site, the amount of interrupted overland flow that's going on with this development is pretty minimal compared to the entire watershed that's going to that vernal pool, in particular adjacent to the rear of the site. They're not discharging any of the stormwater either to the vernal pool. So it's overland flow that's coming off this site, other sites, some small areas of graded lawn area, and none of the stormwater is being discharged towards the vernal pool.
So in effect, we
So-
do not have a disbalance?
Bottom line is there's a balance between existing and proposed.
Okay, good.
As far as drainage, I think the applicant's engineer has been very responsive to the comments that were made. The rain gardens are in there now, that were there at the beginning. I think there's been, you know, really quite a bit of progress on that. The DPW has essentially approved the replacement of the drainage under Clapp Road. The only thing they wanted was to get an analysis of the piping size, you know, a hydraulic analysis. So I think that's still, you know, kind of out there. And they wanted to get the catch basin at 218 Clapp replaced with the 4-foot deep sump catch basin. The water department had a couple of items they wanted. They wanted some additional gates so that the, you know, where the water loops, that, you know, things can be isolated. You know, part of that system can be isolated if it has to be. The landscaping plan, I think, generally is responsive to the issues of the buffer, having a mix of plants that has kind of like a wild, you know, type appearance to it, which goes with the neighborhood. The only thing that, you know, I kind of wondered about, which is just, you know, my own, you know, personal point of view, which I'm not sure if the board will share or not, was just having all the trees, you know, the same type as far as the street trees. I thought it might look a little more like natural if you had a little bit of a mix, but that's kind of a style issue that the board may have a different take on that. The applicants have to have a scenic road hearing because of the additional trees that are having to be removed for the drainage going under Clapp Road. We talked about that this week, and that we had to kind of jump ahead as to when the next hearing would be because we had to get that thing advertised. So, so that hearing will be October 24th, and hopefully we can, you know, at least maybe finish some parts of the discussion that night if we, you know, can't, you know, if the board can't, if the board wants to do that. And then, let's see, I think that's just about it. There were a couple of thoughts that I had also on the open space, but I don't want to jump ahead of where the applicant's going to be.
That brings us back, I'm sorry.
Just one question on the DPW work. How does that sequence in with everything else? Is that done first or
No, it'll be done during the road construction.
during the construction of the cul-de-sac road? Okay,
it'll be coordinated through that process.
okay.
Just to clarify too, Laura, you brought up the water department. We did add those additional gates. They are on the current set of plans.
Oh, great.
We did address those as well.
I have a question on the landscape plan, if I can. So, first off, I want to reiterate Laura's comments and say that I think you guys have been very responsive to the comments that we've made on the board, and I really like seeing the additional rain gardens, that's really appreciative of that. So the question I basically had on the landscape plan was, these are additional items that you're adding, obviously. Was there a thought, or maybe I missed it somewhere, of showing which are the existing trees that will be saved? Like, let's say, behind the houses? I mean, I know there's a lot of vegetation, or is that, for lack of a better word, not clear-cut, but I'm sure there, I'm sure there,
That's an
yeah.
unfortunate use of.
Yeah, that's not, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
certainly didn't mean that. But I know that there was an effort we talked about to save as many trees as possible. So the landscape plan, to me, I was just wondering, would it be possible to show which trees that might be saved, or? I guess seeing that is a little bit deceptive to me, is all I'm saying.
Kind of looks open in a field kind of thing.
Yeah, and I know that that's not the way it would actually look.
Well, as Deb explained at the last meeting, the assumption that she made for the drainage purposes was that the entire site that's shown as an area subject to work would be clear of vegetation, so that she could have that as the worst-case scenario for generating stormwater. We don't expect that it's all going to be cleared like that, because you have the lots all at the end of the cul-de-sac are all designed as walkouts. So once you get to the back of the house, you're at grade, and there wouldn't be any grading in that area. What we're looking at is to not select the trees to save now, so that when individual home buyers come in and they want to design their house a particular way, that you can make choices then about which trees you're going to preserve, working with their specific individual house design. And there are some, but not tons of well, specimen trees that are on each of the lots. So the expectation is that you're going to work with them and review them as an asset to each of the lots. But we haven't identified the specific specimen trees that would be saved on each one yet.
And septic systems are all in front of the houses, between the house and the roadways.
That's right.
The other question I had, I was just curious, I like the sycamore tree in the roundabout, or the cul-de-sac, whatever is the preferred term. Was there any issue there with the fire department? I was curious that they wouldn't allow anything like maximum 3 feet, but yet you could have a tree. That would be
Yeah, it's a good question. No, typically, even when you're working with a site distance triangle or any other restriction, if the tree is limbed up to a certain height, so if you have it limbed up to 6 or 8 feet in height at the base of the we'll call it the crown of the tree, the vegetation, and seeing under.
And that's okay.
What's more important. So that window from 3 to 8 feet, something along those lines, is usually what's acceptable.
So with this being a rain garden and a particular sort of, as Bob pointed out, engineered, are there any specifics about like the root system where over years that can cause that to fail, or maintenance? Or I guess what I'm saying is it a hindrance to have a tree in that particular location eventually, or not?
You know, I've not run into any condition where it's ever been issued down. I don't know if you have any
No.
thoughts about that at all, but.
No, and actually DEP also encourages to have a variety.
Okay.
From shrubs to trees, maybe not, obviously you don't want to have multiple in a, that small of a rain garden, but having trees is also a benefit to it.
Okay.
So, and you kind of try to keep it on that side slope so that if you had to get in there, you can repair the lower base.
Right.
There was consideration, I think you've touched on an important point. There was consideration given to appropriate location of the woody plants around the southern end, let's call it, of the detention basin, because that's bermed up. So you don't want to have woody plants put on the top of it and have their roots potentially interfere with the stability of that slope. So the location of the vegetation that's shown around the perimeter of that, do I get up or do I just point? This area, that was chosen in order to make sure they're in the right place.
And one last question, I swear. The pathway, I think that's what's shown on the landscaping plan, which would be the, from the cul-de-sac, basically through the two rain gardens to the detention.
Yes.
So that is a pathway. I just want to make sure that that's what it was, right?
Yes.
And it's like a gravel pathway right now? Is that what it?
Right, it's in conjunction with the access that's required to get down to,
Right.
Which can be grass, it doesn't need to be gravel. And the top of the berm along the backside of the basin will be grassed, but it'll be level and definitely walkable because you need that access around the basin. I don't know if that's a good segue into.
I planned that, unless there were other questions
Is there other questions?
No.
from my colleagues.
I have one only. The infiltration rate in the big basin has been changed from Beals and Thomas review. Does that still give you the freeboard that you need in the 100-year storm event?
It does,
Okay.
yes. We did do some adjustments to the outlet control structure to adjust the flow or flood elevation within the basin so that we maintain those requirements, yes.
So I think that brings us all the way back into,
It brings us back to the next subject, which is fine. So that, the pathway that would be used to be able to keep an eye on and maintain the detention basin is also the beginning of the pathway to provide access, the private access into the pathway system going out into the Maxwell Trust, or what we hope will become, or think will become part of the Maxwell Trust property. And that's gonna, that topic is the next issue that we'll need to discuss. Let's talk about the pathway system first. We've had a number of meetings with representatives of the Maxwell Trust. I've gone out onto the site with them and looked at the existing trail system that's out there and have come up with a sort of a loop that Deb can sort of point out to you how it ties in.
Starting here, here's the subdivision road. This is the path along the access way and around the rear portion of the basin. Then we hop off and we can come across the open space. That would be the start of the open space area to what we identify as the public trail, which would tie into, loop around the open space in the upland area and tie in both locations to the Litchfield Trail. What you see here, this big wide is the demarcation of the existing trails that are currently on the town properties. And I believe Paul met with Howard and they walked through here and this is the general sketch or location of the trails that they thought was appropriate. This here, loop being the public trail, and this identified as a private footpath or trail, because it focusing going into the subdivision rather than being on the open space area.
Can you describe how the trail would actually be prepared on the ground? It's as I understand, it's sort of minimal impact.
Sure. The discussion with Howard, again, was that the path would be about 3 feet wide, which is relatively consistent with the existing trails out there. And basically, it's using the existing topography and only going out and clearing brush and briars for that pathway or any tree falls that might be in the way of that path. And we've also identified that the location of the specific trail is subject to some field adjustment at the time that they start doing it. As they get in there, maybe they find a better pathway and want to tweak it a little bit a second time around. So that would be coordinated.
So is it different from how the Litchfield Trail is prepared?
It's very consistent with all of the smaller trails. There's a
Yep.
portion of Litchfield Trail from here to about here that's wider.
Wider, yeah.
I think at some time it was the access path for vehicles out there. So it's actually 8 to 10 feet wide, nice grass, it's
Mhm.
nice. But once you get past here, you get into smaller pathways. I can show you, I took a few pictures of some of the existing pathways just so that we could get an idea of what they look like. This, as you can see, so these are the little signage, just trying to get a few of those right for the trail you're on. These are pictures of the Litchfield Trail. Here you can see that I'm actually standing on a trail, so it's and then here it's just, it looks very much like a footpath. That's the horse trail I took a photo of as well.
And those are all marked with trail markers?
They have
Yeah.
trail markers.
Uh-huh.
I had a couple that were in the area, so I was trying to get, there's another trail marker
Oh, yeah.
right there.
Okay.
Let's see one more photo. But that's, so we would, these trails would be created consistent with the trails that are out there today, in conjunction with the what are now the open space land trustee, whomever that would be.
And who actually will create the trail? Who will make the trail?
I think that was in coordination with this project, if that's correct. I can't recall what the discussion was. That's going to be coordinated with.
During the course of construction of the infrastructure of the road.
Okay.
Would maintenance of that, and there's not much, I realize, but, you know, a blowdown or something, would that be part of the homeowners?
Well, no, once
Agreement?
the conservation parcel is created and the trails are there, well, let's say, that may be the subject for the next conversation, now that I think about it.
Okay. I mean, the part of it that's on, you know, your property.
The part of it that's on the subdivision property would be the responsibility of the homeowners association.
Yes, that's what I was
Yes,
referring to.
exactly.
From the cul-de-sac, so the cul-de-sac down to the retention basin around the edge.
That's right,
That
up
part.
to that
But that's not a
parcel
public trail,
boundary.
No,
Right.
right?
But it would be,
But it-
we could have something in the homeowners association saying that that's the responsibility to at least keep that mowed and cut and
Yes.
Right, but
passable.
it's public in the sense that.
make sure I
it's-
understand that people who are going across this public trail, you're not intending for them to go across the private footpath to the road.
Correct, actually, let's assume the property boundary is here as we proposed
Right.
it.
So the real
We've talked-
public benefit is the public trail.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right. So what we talked about with the Maxwell Trust is to have basically a sign at this point that would say, you know, from this point on, it's private property. Very similar to what you'd have in like a trustees of reservations trail system, where you get to a property boundary, and they'll have a sign letting you know this is no longer trust property. And so the trail from this point down to the cul-de-sac would be maintained by the homeowners association.
And would be public in the sense only that all of the people in the homeowners association would get to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good segue point then to the question of how do we proceed from here with regard to the natural heritage permitting and decisions about how that parcel is going to be held into the future. We've gone as far as we can on the natural heritage rare and species protection permit because we need to have this permit in place and know the planning board's preference and the conservation commission's preference. Hopefully it's in the same thing as to how that parcel should be held. They call it three alternatives. The 8-acre parcel could be held privately by the homeowners association, but with a conservation restriction on it, making it open to the public passage. It could be held, or actually conveyed to the town, to the Conservation Commission, held as conservation land, or it could be conveyed to the Maxwell Trust as a private trust holding the title. The question is, what does the planning board see as its preference? Well, we haven't made a definitive decision yet on our point, but we'd like very much to have input.
Can I ask a question about those three alternatives
Sure.
before you all? the way the language in our bylaw is written, they talk about, the way it's usually been interpreted has been that the open space is either donated to the town for conservation purposes, donated to a conservation trust, or that there has to be a deed restriction that's accepted by the state, like a, you know, one that is in favor of the state. And those are very hard to get. I don't know if you've had experience with those.
I'm
but
very familiar with those.
so you know that they don't really accept them, they don't hold them except for, you know, really significant pieces of open space.
Actually, I think that this would be precisely the kind of a property that the Secretary of Environmental Affairs would contemplate having a permanent conservation restriction on, where it's an 8-acre parcel. That's actually a pretty significant piece, and it's surrounded by other already preserved land as part of the natural heritage permitting process. If NHESP asked for a conservation restriction to be placed on it as a way of helping to preserve that land in perpetuity, the Secretary would sign it in a heartbeat. I'm very comfortable we'd get that approved.
Because one of the things that I think we have in here somewhere is that the planning board has to get a letter from the secretary saying that they're interested in it.
Well, we haven't made that inquiry to them yet, because we're looking for input from the two boards about how you'd prefer to have the land held, so we can make decisions about the way to go. We haven't pursued.
I have a question back to you. You said you met with the Maxwell Trust individuals. What was their feeling? I mean, did they want the land? Was that their preference?
That's my understanding. I think there's someone here from the Maxwell Trust.
Oh,
who will speak for that.
okay.
I don't believe that's right. The Litchfield property, you misspoke, that is town-owned property. That is all CPC funded property, and it's owned by the town. The land that your piece of abuts, that's town.
Can you point that out up here?
I'm sorry if I misspoke, but that would be town property is all here.
It's all
Yes.
town property. The
Yes.
only,
That's correct, all of this is town-owned.
there's
Okay.
only a couple of parcels, and they're on the other side of Bates Lane that are actually under Maxwell Trust, they actually own. But the whole rest of that area is under the Conservation Trust, okay? And there is, CRs have to go on all the property that we have purchased from CPC funds over the years, but it is under the care of the conservation. And I would.
And who maintains the trails now?
Who maintains the trail? It's a bunch of volunteers, to be honest with you. Howard, myself, I mean, we did the signs out there in the little tags. And at this point in time, conservation, we did have the Conway School come in last year and do a study on all the trails out there. And we have to have a report, but we haven't had the opportunity yet to really get a focus group to decide exactly what we want to do, because we are going to put some at least one parking lot on Bates Lane to get the parking for that area off of private property. But that whole area, the 200 acres, is under the town, the conservation. So I am on conservation, but I have a very strong feeling that it should all stay under conservation, with a CR would have to be put on it, definitely.
Shan Morrissey, Director of Maxwell Conservation Trust. Our role typically with that land that's been preserved in other parcels is that the trust works with homeowners to bring a project, or the property owners to bring a project to the Community Preservation Committee, and the funding comes from the Community Preservation Committee. The land is then held by the town/Conservation Commission, and the conservation restrictions are written and are held by conservation. So Maxwell Trust doesn't, as Penny said, we own a couple of parcels, but generally we have worked with the town and CPC and landowners to have parcels under control of Conservation Commission.
Sounds
Yeah, I
like we
think
can do it.
we're gonna have to leave this as the cliffhanger to make sure everybody's interested in coming back at our next meeting. Because we're currently running late,
Okay.
and we've got another hearing that's posted right after. So I think what we're looking for is a continuation to,
I guess to October 24th at 8:45.
is that acceptable to you?
Just check one moment, make sure that date is okay.
That's when you all agreed for the scenic road hearing, so I hope it still
I'll-
works.
What was the time?
8:45. Okay, so I need a motion to continue the public hearing to 8:45 on October 24th.
So
So moved.
Very grateful that Richard is here.
Oh, you have it there?
Yeah.
I'll read
You
it
don't have to.
formally, why not, for TV. I move to request to continue the public hearing for the definitive subdivision plan, flexible open space, special permit, and scenic road, public shade tree hearing for Benjamin Studley Farm, a flexible open space definitive subdivision at 214 Clap Road, until October 24th, 2013, at 8:45 PM.
Now that I have a 4 television
Second.
motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
It's a flexible open space special permit and definitive subdivision plan and a scenic road hearing. The applicant is Douglas Sheeran. Why don't you update us with what's transpired since our last meeting? I think the cliffhanger where we left was the question as to determination of the banks of the stream and the 25% disturbed area. Why don't we start with that, and we can go from there.
Sure. Good evening again, Morse Engineering. Since the last meeting, what we've done is we've submitted 2 revised plans to the board. The first, the board expressed a desire to see the landscape plan. We had a registered landscape architect put together a detailed landscaping plan, and that was submitted for your review. Secondly, we revised our existing conditions plan. Especially, we revised it with respect to the tributary and the 150-foot buffer that is associated with that tributary. We understand that the board at the last meeting expressed a desire for a separate consultant review of that tributary. We received a proposal from a consultant chosen by the staff that we did not feel was a reasonable proposal. But we have had additional review of the tributary, and what I can tell you is that we have some special guests with us tonight. We'll go over it. We have with us Brad Holmes, who has a Bachelor's of Science in Biology. He also has a Master's of Science in Environmental Engineering. He's a professional wetland scientist, and he has been involved with all of our wetlands delineation on the site. We have Mr. Peter Dillon, who's a professional geologist. He has 25 years' experience. He's a past DEP employee. He's a water commissioner on the town of Norwell. He's a Board of Health member of the town of Norwell. He's a lecturer at BC with respect to geology. And thirdly, we have with us Mr. Steve Ivis. Steve Ivis was hired by the town, specifically the Conservation Commission, to review the resources that we have on this site. Steve is a past director of the North and South River Watershed Association, a wetland scientist, a water commissioner in the town of Norwell, and is very familiar with the site. Steve walked this site with the DEP during our review of the lines out here. I'm hoping that their testimony or any questions that the board has can be directed to them, and that will alleviate the questions that have arisen at this point in time. And I want to remind the board how this all transpired. when we originally filed with Conservation Commission, this line here was delineated, and it was reviewed by the Conservation Commission. It was reviewed by Mr. Rivas, Mr. Holmes were out there. We also delineated this line by the Conservation Commission, and that was reviewed and approved by the Conservation Commission, being the intermittent stream. The significance of that is the intermittent stream is what defines the edge of the defined channel where we measure the 150-foot buffer from. Between these two locations, we had previously labeled it as no bank observed, and we measured our 150 feet from the beginning and the end of these two streams. Since the last meeting, we've had Peter Dillon go out to the site, and he's hung additional flags to connect those two streams together, shown there in pink. That was the location that we were looking for the third-party consultant to look at, that connection there. The original review came in from the consultant at $6,500. There have been several revisions. I think it's been down to $5,000. It maybe got down to $3,500 at the latest. But irregardless, the applicant has spent money on a separate hydrogeologist to go out, and we have the pleasure of, again, the town's consultant that's already been on the site, walked this with Bruce Pauk of the DEP, and reviewed this specific location with us, Steve Ibis in the audience. Now, we're hoping that we can get by this tributary issue tonight. It's been a thorn, I think, in all of our sides this entire time, and we'd like to put it behind us.
Before you go much further, just the question of, I assume that machine over there is taping this?
That's just the remote control.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Propping up a poster.
Not yet. No, it was, yeah.
I wasn't sure what it was.
You know, we have received, you know, additional correspondence. We understand that Karen Joseph has done a review of our landscape plan. We are proposing to make revisions to that. And then we just received John Chessie's second or third or fourth review letter as of 3 o'clock this afternoon. So there are a couple of minor modifications we'll make to that. John also did list a summary of issues, kind of as an outline of the project here. We'd like to go through those, you know, specifically with the board and try to get guidance on how we can bring this thing to a close. But we really felt it was necessary to bring in, you know, the outside consultants here and put them before the board for respect to this tributary issue.
Greg, just quick question. On with the additional information, with the tributary, did anything change?
No, the way that the tributary was defined in the 150-foot buffer to it, we measured 150 feet out from this location to the no disturb, and 150 feet out from that location to the no disturb. Again, the no disturb, I'll highlight here in green. Because we drew a radius from this point and a radius from that point of 150 feet, none of these flags pushed that radius out. They didn't interfere with the limit of work as it's currently shown.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'd be interested in having one, if not all of your experts, tell me why this thing is so difficult to figure out where if you would, the channel or the banks are.
I guess if we can start, we'll start with our consultant, Peter Dillon, and then maybe the town's Steve Ibis from the Conservation Commission.
I guess it's not. And to answer your question, you can see the scour channel. There's a scour channel that joins the two of them together, and it meets the definition of tributary to water supply in 310 CMR 22, which is and basically what I did for this is I knew that Bruce had been down here. Bruce and I worked together in technical services years ago, and I worked on these issues. But I wanted to make sure that things were still the same. So I did call him about this. We discussed it, and he told me what he had seen. I went out and saw the exact same thing. Based on the definition in the regulations, that's what you have.
And so you establish these points with some kind of GPS?
I'm flagging, and then I don't know how you guys pick them up.
We-
I went out and flagged it, and then they picked up the flags.
And was there anybody else there with you as you were doing this? Did we have anybody from the town or?
No. I do believe, though, that when, I think that Laura was out there when DEP was here. So, this is the same, I actually CC'd the state on this letter, and I talked to Bruce afterwards, he said, yeah, that's what I saw, so.
When you flag something like this, are you flagging the center line of the channel?
In this case, it's really kind of the edges where,
Okay, so
it's not very wide.
it doesn't impact whether or not there's a big storm event and the flow through there is 6 feet wide as opposed to 1.5 feet wide that it might have.
Yeah, no, you're looking at the tributary that runs through there. I think maybe the reason that this is a little bit, this is my interpretation of this. My interpretation is that probably in the past, although this looks somewhat man-made, this is the natural area that basically this is where the stream was.
Yep.
When the road was put in, and then there was a small wetland there. Now, if this wetland was larger, you would actually terminate the tributary here, but it's not. And I think Bruce and I both agreed that it wasn't big enough to terminate it at that point. What would happen is that when this road was built, there's drainage that comes down through here that was man-made. And basically, when they put the road in, they just dug a trench down here and just let it flow. And so this area here has developed since then as a channel to get the water from the roadway down through this little tiny, this wetland area into the former stream. And so you can see scour. It's clear that that's where the channel is, but it's clearly not as defined as what was dug out. You can actually see piles of material that were dug out of the stream or out of this part of the intermittent stream, and clear scour there. And then when you get down in here, you can see much more of a. If this was altered at some point in the past by a person, it was a long time ago. That's basically about what I saw. I didn't go up any farther. I did go. There's always the question about how far you actually trace this, whether the drain lines of the street become part of the tributary and everything else. So it's, there's definitely a little bit of an art in it.
Was this after a fairly significant rain event? I remember our last meeting that we had, several days later, there was quite a significant rainfall, I believe. And we were talking about it.
Yeah, you would need a lot of rain in order to more than we've had in the last, it's been pretty dry. My guess is that also, if I'll ramble on about this if you want me to, is that this is not probably a gaining stream. In other words, it's clearly not gaining now. The water table's low enough here in this area that you're not getting contribution from groundwater. So most likely this stays dry most of the time, and it probably only really gets water in it when there's significant flow. It's possible that in March or something like that, you might get a little bit of a contribution from some of the area down in here, but looking at the slopes and everything, I don't think so. So unless it's actually raining or shortly after a rainstorm, you're going to see most of this dry.
And so I guess I'll ask the question that since we said no bank observed before, but you clearly observed
It's definitely
a bank, so.
Clearly see the channel, and that's what that's what's in 310 CMR 22.
Right.
So there's clearly a channel that goes through there.
Yeah. We could have avoided all this if we could have done this in the first place.
Yeah, Greg?
Well, actually, it's funny, when I called Bruce about it, he said, I marked that, I know where it went. And I'm like, okay, whatever, so.
Excuse me, Greg, when you went before the Conservation Commission, you said they've approved what you've got indicated in blue,
Yes.
but not the piece that is
So-
sort of under discussion now. Why, so because it was marked that you couldn't find a bank through that stretch, would you go back to them now and get them to approve this? Do you need to?
I really want Steve Ivas to answer that, but I think the answer that I would say is that the areas that we had delineated in blue, especially down gradient of the pink line, that's where you had a bank that's jurisdictional under the Wetlands Protection Act, which is what the commission observes. That is different than the regulations applicable to a tributary.
That's right. Mr. Chairman, if I may, Steve Ivas, Ivas Environmental Consultant for the Conservation Commission on this project. Interesting question you ask. This location right here is where groundwater breaks out of the surface. That's the point at which we believe that the tributary begins under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Okay.
Okay. Here, there is definitely a channel. It's a dry channel. This was also a dry channel all the way up, every single time we've seen it. There's no groundwater close to the surface under this channel, which I call a drainage ditch from the roadway. In fact, as a water resource person, my recommendation to you would be to somehow disconnect this drainage ditch from the groundwater breakout. Groundwater breakout is very good quality, high quality water here.
Yeah.
This is very poor water quality coming through here.
Sure.
And I believe that we spoke in the Conservation Commission permit hearings about the applicant putting in a stilling basin here to drop out some of the sand and the pollutants that adhere and adsorb to the sand and gravels, so that those pollutants wouldn't continue down this area into Tack Factory Pond.
So in the view of the Conservation Commission, the 150-foot buffer zone requirement terminates at that point and doesn't apply to the sort of up top of the map channel?
The tributary is not under the Conservation Commission jurisdiction. It's under the Planning Board jurisdiction. So they have another jurisdiction, and it's a 200-foot stream here, 200-foot stream channel. Have you put that on the plan, Fred?
Well, that's an intermittent stream.
Right, yes, I'm sorry, this is an intermittent stream, that's correct. So it only flows part of the time. The 200-foot is a perennial stream.
Okay.
So this only flows part of the time, of
Right.
course. Okay. So it's an entirely different question. It's apples and oranges, because it's under your jurisdiction, the tributary question, and the tributary definition is under your jurisdiction, whereas the intermittent stream jurisdiction is under the Conservation Commission jurisdiction.
And whose jurisdiction is the Water Resource Protection District under? Is that ours?
Well, it's yours and the building department, that's a zoning.
It's not Conservation Commission.
That's correct. That's correct.
Everybody else but.
We know who it isn't.
And I was out there with Bruce Falk, and we walked this channel. That's exactly what we walked. So I can confirm that.
And you're speaking on behalf of the Conservation
That is
Commission?
correct. On your Conservation Commission, yes.
Very good.
Sir.
Other questions on the board? Questions on the public? Lance?
Yes, I don't know if you saw this picture. I showed it to you, we gave it to you.
We've seen it, yeah.
So you've seen this?
Yep.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about the statement that Mr. Morse made. He said we focused on this area here. What the Water Resources Committee and the abutter also asked, and I asked too, that the entire tributary be reviewed. And, you know, as you can see, excuse me, as you can see in this picture, the flags are pretty, you know, you've seen this before. The flag in this area is pretty way off, and that's around the IB out here. So,
Yeah, to speak to your picture, just, I've seen those before. I don't have any way of, I mean, I can't tell from those pictures
well,
where
that's
things
why
are.
I think you should be a hydrogeologist. I think neither Mr. Ivas or Mr. Dillon have really confirmed the edge of the bank. of this tributary.
I guess I was speaking more to
I-
those flags and
I
how
think
they
there's
represent.
there's two issues, though. If the edge of the bank is not confirmed, and I'm not saying it has or hasn't been, then you've got to define that as a tributary. I haven't heard it defined this evening as a tributary. It's not a tributary to our water supply. There's a point at which the tributary to our water supply begins, and that's where the groundwater breakout.
Mr. Brown has confirmed that.
No.
No?
The watershed contributes to the water supply.
All right,
Okay.
is that, and it's confusing because you're dealing with two different programs.
Help me.
Okay, is that under the conservation regulations, this, basically, the wetland area that's here and the stream are regulated there. But under the water supply regulations, which is, I won't even give you the numbers, but under the water supply regulations, there's a definition that's different than the one that's in the Wetlands Protection Act. And that basically says, it talks about channel, all right? But it's basically the channel, and it can be man-made, it can be intermittent, it doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
So this whole area would be included as part of that. So that helps.
But there's no debate about the blue lines here. That, I mean, those were staked. The Conservation Commission has signed off on those and all that?
Conservation has signed off on this. You know, this up in here.
That's what I mean.
Is, I don't know, did Conservation do anything with the drainage?
Nothing off-site. But they look at the off-site.
Oh, they did,
Nothing
okay.
off-site.
So
On-site.
north of where the pink line is?
Yes.
Conservation hasn't done that, or they did do that?
I've just got to look at the plan.
It's basically this is the.
Yes, this is on site, yes, absolutely. Right, they approved this. In fact, they approved this line here. Greg, would you take another marker and mark the BVW, the bordering vegetated wetland line as well, and you'll see how close that line is to the intermittent stream. This is where the,
Which
there's
means-
more than 50% wetlands.
Which means uplands occur pretty quickly when you're coming away from that channel.
That's exactly right. And this is the 3-parameter method as well. So we have hydric soils, hydrology, and the wetland plants.
Mhm.
And we have a line in magenta or purple, however you see it. So the line, we're very, very close to the intermittent stream here.
At that point. Humor me, but you, I think, mentioned that the Conservation Commission suggested that there be some work where that pink line is that would actually interrupt the flow and keep it from going into the stream that actually feeds
The surface
feeds
water
the
from
water
the
supply.
groundwater.
It would
Right.
be a wonderful thing.
If that were
Where
done,
would you do that?
Pardon?
Where would you do that?
Well, you would do that along this blue line somewhere, anywhere along this blue line. Or you could actually take this blue line and divert it into a basin.
Do it up at the road?
You're gonna,
if,
Well, that's too far away because the applicant doesn't really have control over the property up in here. You do it on the applicant's property. I'm speaking for the
But
applicant.
that's in the no disturb zone.
understood, but I'm going someplace that, let me get there, and then we'll shoot it down.
As a mitigation measure, I take it you're thinking mitigation.
I'm thinking that if you interrupt that flow, then again, it becomes a moot point. We have not done anything to the supply to our water supply.
Actually, you have
improved it.
Well, we've improved it,
the
right.
quality of the water, and in fact, if there is permeable soils here, if there are permeable soils here, and you have an infiltration, you're able to infiltrate the water into the soil, then you provide a much better quality water.
Right.
When the water finally breaks out in this area.
But the catch-22 is that we can't work in that zone because it's within 150 feet of the water supply channel, or the water supply.
As I
Stream.
understand the regulations, that is correct.
Right.
If you could, you better.
yeah, I think that there's, you know, obviously a water supply improvement, you'd have to run this by, this would actually need to get run past the technical services group in Boston.
Yep.
But I think that if you're improving water quality, that there would be, you know, that would be something that they would like to see.
They'd be willing to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, like I said to you earlier, I mean, you know, a lot of times when, because technically, the definitions, any drainage structure coming in at all becomes technically tributary.
I see,
Look at
okay.
those areas.
Okay.
So there's definitely some wiggle room in this, especially if you're gonna be improving the overall water quality to the reservoir.
So in that definition, everything within the watershed of the reservoir is part of the water supply?
No, it's gotta be a direct, overland flow is not considered, it's going there. All right, so there's a zone A, there's a zone B, and there's a zone C, very similar to the groundwater stuff. Zone A's are the ones that are the actual tributaries, and have the greatest amount of protection. But the overall watershed it does have protection, it's just, that's the focus.
All right, I won't.
It's its own world.
I know you've got better things to do than to teach me all this.
Absolutely not. I love doing this.
And just to help remind me again, can you show me with the 150 foot is taken from, is that blue line, is that correct? Or from the purple line?
It's taken from the blue line.
Blue line.
The pink line.
Line.
And the blue line.
Okay,
So, that's where it runs, because that line there, that's where you have the channel of running water that
Okay.
makes the tributary.
so it is very important to have that channel or drainage, as I think was said, drainage ditch or drainage area, the center line of that marked as accurately as possible.
We actually, all the flags have been hung on the project side of the tributary. We didn't flag the center line, we hung the side that's
bank.
closest
Okay,
to the
this is
line.
okay.
The bank.
All right, good.
Just one more comment.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I've been involved, I was involved in the watershed study, which was funded through Samantha Wood's organization and DEP. And it was assisted by these operators. And I think it's important to understand that the watershed is something where you want water quality to be addressed at roadways and all over town, including this spot. And I think if you have a good catch basin system, culvert system, it's important to clean the water there, but it's also important to keep flow into that area. And between the water that they're saying that, they're not sure whether, it really kicks in at a certain amount of flow or not. I mean, I was there, when there was 1.5 inches of rain, and you've seen the video. I mean, it really kicks in. And that water, I believe, is not only surface water. I think that, when the groundwater starts to go up, seasonally, you do have influence from groundwater in a large part of that tributary. And to hear somebody start saying, I'm gonna cut that tributary up and, shut it down and move it around, without having somebody really investigate that area closely, somebody who understands the hydrology of that area, besides just walking through it, once or twice or whatever. That's why you get a hydrogeologist. They're gonna look at the studies that have been done for the town on groundwater elevations. They're gonna look at a lot of information about this area. And it's the kind of thing that, when I was on the Water Resources Committee, we really wanted people to do when you were looking at a tributary area. And I can see what's going on. It seems like some of the consultants are trying to get you a little bit away from the importance of maintaining a flow through that entire area. And so I think, number one, it is a tributary, and we've all agreed to that. Number two, water quality should be controlled at the road area itself. I don't think you should interrupt the flow and consider some kind of mitigation.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't suggesting that. It was sort of a theoretical discussion.
And I think the line is incorrect. It's still incorrect. I mean, that's what
I was asked to address what Mr. Van Munson was saying. There's a very simple technique at the road, which is a deep sunk catch basin. But I was suggesting the water would go in the same location, actually, if you actually disconnected this from the groundwater breakout. The water would go back into the ground and come back out at the groundwater breakout.
As a breakout,
So
yeah.
I wasn't
Filtered
saying
at that
take
point.
it anywhere else off the property or anything, just
Right.
keep it on the same site,
Right.
and make it cleaner. It's very simple, just make it cleaner. You could make it cleaner here, or you could make it cleaner back at the roadway, or you can make it cleaner anywhere in the middle here, depending on what you had available.
If I can add one,
One last thing on the groundwater, and understanding what's going on here at the site, is that I did look at the test pits that have been done for the system, and looking at the elevation at the bottom of this and where the slope is, it does not look like, in fact, it would be impossible for this area right in here to be receiving groundwater, except under very, very extreme conditions, which it would have to be above the modeling that's been seen at the site. As you get down in here, there's probably, in fact, actually, there's some springs that are down here. I'm not talking about this area. The only thing that I'm talking about is this area up here. So, do I understand the groundwater in this place? Yes, I do. Have I worked in Scituate, all over Scituate for the last 25 years? Yeah, I have. So I do understand. I think I delineated 2 of the Zone 2s in town. So I do understand the geology and the hydrogeology of most of the town.
Brad Holmes, wetland scientist that was involved in the original site delineation, worked with the town in confirmation of the wetland lines that are locked into the order of resource area delineation. And just 2 points. One point I'd like to back up what Peter just talked about as far as the groundwater breakout. You certainly have springs and nice clean groundwater that's getting into the banks of this stream coming down through here. In this upper limit of the site, I agree, you're at the very limit of the bordering vegetated wetland. You can see the topography sheds this way. You don't have groundwater that would normally get into the stream. It's my opinion that the only water that's coming through this upper reaches is stormwater off the street. You can see it with the sand. You can walk the sand line. The other point I wanted to talk about was the delineation of the streams. They've been done through here in accordance with, if you see the first observable break and slope, that's the top of your bank to the stream. If you don't have at first, nice distinct break and slope, then you go with that outer limit of where the higher flood line would be, and that is how that line is done in the upper reaches where that limit of scouring. So you're actually on the conservative edge of being a little bit landward of where the real channel of the stream would be, or tributary. As a wetland scientist, when I say streams, we're all working within the wetland. So I think when we say tributary and streams, it gets confusing because we're talking about a piece of tributary that we're also referring to as stream. But in the wetlands arena, anything up gradient of a bordering vegetated wetland wouldn't be a stream. That's where it gets confusing. So I just want to add those 2 points.
Thank you.
Excuse me, how flat is the pink section?
It's a gentle slope shedding down towards the west.
See the topography on it?
Yeah. Are these 1 foot?
We didn't do full topography.
And Mr. Chairman and members,
Drops about 5 feet.
the area may be a channel, but it's really
I think
not,
these are 1 foot contours.
it's not enough to qualify as a bank under the Wetlands Protection Act. And that's why we have blue lines here. This is really a bank under the Wetlands
No,
Protection
here's the
Act.
no observed bank over here.
Here,
That's the
there's
Sorry, I'm
certainly
on
a
the
bank
wrong
under
one.
the Wetlands Protection
Got
Act
it, sorry.
against here. That's why we have the 2 separate regulations. Bank, we can see here very easily. Bank, we can see here easily. This doesn't look like a bank under the Wetlands Protection Act. And therein lies the difference, although it is a small channel to the ground. It's very, very subtle.
But just to reiterate, the upper blue line that is on the property that is currently flagged, the conservation has signed off on.
That is correct.
All right.
As a ditch, as a non-jurisdictional ditch.
It's signed off on the location.
The Conservation Commission signed off on the location. They approved that, they walked that line. That line was subject to an appeal. The abutters all have the right to appeal a project, and they did. They did appeal this line. This line went to the DEP. The neighbors withdrew their appeal the day before the site walk of this project. So that line, as you see it, has been through the appeal process, it's been given up.
Less than that.
That's the approved line.
And one further small detail, inside the wetland, it is an intermittent stream. Outside the wetland, it's just a ditch. That's an important distinction under the Wetlands Protection Act. Sorry to bother you with that detail.
We're gonna need a
but
chart.
it's very important.
Well, it's important,
It is very important.
I can add that to things that I write, it's just a ditch.
We need a glossary of terms here.
Very patiently, go ahead.
I was wondering here if you could tell me, how do you determine in the tributary, the part that is just the ditch that feeds the water supply, that how, because I walked out there too, and it is very, it's not very clear where the edge of bank is.
You're not necessarily looking for edge of bank, you're looking for channel.
Right.
Okay, and the channel's defined by Scituate. That's how Bruce did it, that's how I did it.
So but that's not saying that that's the edge of where you would see water flowing. I mean, in a bigger storm, you're gonna have.
In a superstorm, you're gonna have water coming all over the place, and also, like I said, you know, this is Zone A. Zone B includes a lot of other, I mean, if you look around there, there's actually other channels that actually flow into, you know, into some man-made, and that flow into that tributary, mostly coming from the port properties. But you can definitely see them there, and Bruce noted them as well.
So you used scour to find edge of
Scour
bank.
to when you're looking for channel.
Edge of channel.
Channel.
Is that
You know,
defined by a certain size of
Right, it's
storm?
different, no, you're not just defined by size of storm either. It's basically geomorpho, well, it's a geomorphological feature that you're seeing actually that indicates that flow is moving through there. Larger grain size, and that's really kind of the primary thing that you're looking for, is a change in grain size from what you would see through the rest of the area.
So what is it indicative of, though? Is there a storm, 100-year flood? Is there a storm size
There's
that's associated with
no
that?
size at all, no size
So
at
we
all.
don't know the frequency of the.
Is it a velocity,
frequency.
is it velocity related?
Nope,
No?
nope, the definition itself talks about channel, man-made, intermittent, or flowing. Doesn't make any, it's not, in fact, actually, I think I had the definition in my letter. You can read it. But there isn't any, there's no size, as long as there's channel.
Yeah, right.
And as I said earlier, one of the things that this wetland area is not big enough to terminate the tributary at this point right here. If this, as I said earlier, if this wetland here was larger, this tributary would be terminated here. Because it's a flow. If it was bigger, but that's how it works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went out there, my look at it was that it was very, there really wasn't any clear delineation that I could find. I was looking around for both wetlands indicator things that people look for in a bank, and it was very unclear.
I've been looking, it's the geologist that's been looking at stuff like this for a long, long time to see those signs. A long time.
And we had that discussion in the field when I went out with the DEP person.
Lance?
I think one of the points of getting an independent consultant is to get somebody who really represents the town on this tributary issue, and not somebody who's, been hired by the consultant. I hear people putting words in, saying that Bruce Bauck said this, Bruce Bauck said that. I was at part of the site here into the area where I was allowed to walk. I talked to Bruce. I was keeping up with his email exchanges. He talked about micro channels. He talked about some things that people haven't brought up here tonight. And I think, the board did decide to do that. get an independent consultant because the issue was raised, and I see nothing, and haven't heard anything tonight that's confirmed that the edge has really been determined by somebody who's independent of proponent.
Well, correct me if I'm misunderstanding this. I thought I heard the town's Conservation Commission consultants say they've confirmed this.
That is correct.
This geography. So I don't think you're working for the
No,
proponent.
not at all.
But his opinion was countered by Mr. Bell about this issue.
Mr. who?
Ivas was only hired to deal with the wetlands, not the tributary.
I don't know who you're talking about.
That is the DEP person who saw the same exact microchannel and channel.
Right. And is there a...
There's no difference between...
Did he come up with a different line?
He came up with a entirely different opinion from Mr. Ivas.
I actually-
Mr. Ivas said it wasn't a tributary.
I said it wasn't
Mr.
a
Bell said it is.
stream.
Wait a minute. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it
No.
wasn't a stream under the Wetlands Protection Act.
You can read his
Mm-hmm.
report if you want to see his report, Mr. Chairman. I'll send it to you. Mr. Ivas said it's not a tributary, right? That's his report. And then he was found wrong by Mr. Bell from DEP. That's one of the reasons why I want to get an independent hydrogeologist.
What section was that definition distinction referring to, sir? In other words,
During the wetlands hearing, Mr. Ivas presented a report and did a presentation.
okay,
And he said, this is not a tributary, this is this, this is this, this is that. There's not a connection between the two intermittent streams, and he used the word tributary frequently. You can see the video, you can read his report. And then when Mr. Bow came out, and I was there, he said, it is a tributary. So Mr. Ivas's opinion on this issue as a zoning issue is really not, in my opinion, worth listening to, because it's not valid. In this case, we're talking about a tributary.
well, there's two things I believe we're talking about. One is that, the other is the location of whatever you choose to call that connection. I'm not really as interested in what it's called as I am in where it is. And I think I've heard tonight that where it is pretty well agreed upon by the people who have spoken. And, it's a wide range of people, and they seem to come from different perspectives and different expertise, but I'm hearing agreement in terms of location, if not in terms of the definition of exactly what we might be locating here.
Are you hearing it strong enough that would preclude continuing with looking to have an independent consultant look at it?
No, I think that's still an ideal solution, if we can achieve it.
What about the rest of the board?
I'd like to answer, I'm sorry, is it Lance? Is that right? Correct?
Lance.
Okay. Just, are you mainly in dispute of the pink area, or are you in dispute of the upper blue portion? Because I keep hearing that, what I'm thinking is the upper blue line has been signed off by conservation, and that's really the 150 foot that would impact this particular development. So I'd like to just understand which particular pieces you have issue with. Is it both of them, or just the pink issue?
I agree with the Water Resources Committee and John Clarkson wrote in his last letter that he would like the entire stream to be reviewed by hydrogeologists, not just the pink area. Starting from, the point where it enters the site. So that means the tributary, including the blue line, should be reviewed.
So it's of your opinion that that upper blue line could potentially shift and therefore impact where the 150 feet is in the development.
Good. I mean, we haven't established exactly where it is through an independent consultant.
It absolutely has, and we have our hydrogeologist here tonight to go over it. It's been through the DEP. The neighbors had the right to appeal it. They had the right to have DEP come out and do the site walk. They were holding up the project, and prior to the site walk, they withdrew their appeal of that line. That line is solid. It's solid for a period of 3 years, and we're only into the first year. We haven't even met the 1-year timeline on it.
Right, actually, DEP, if I may add, DEP did walk the line as far as during the ANRAD process. We did have one on-site site walk with DEP wetlands, Greg Caesar from DEP, and he agreed with the flags in the field. We didn't move any flags, and the appeal was later dropped after that site meeting. I think there was another site meeting with DEP that Greg was referring to, a second one, which may not have been with the wetlands and waterways, but wetlands and waterways did walk this. We didn't move any flags. They were in agreement. We didn't need any more revisions other than the ones that we did with the conservation consultant, Mr. Ibis, and that were included in the plan that was locked in through the ANRAD that's shown here.
They want to move to.
Go for it.
Doug Sharon. Is it my understanding, Fred, this is locked in. This was under appeal, it withdrew. This is done.
Yes. Those are the
So
solid
we're
lines.
talking about this area right here.
Just the pink line.
It's confusing. Maybe it's just confusing things a little bit here. He wants all this redone. It's done, locked in. And went through an appeal period.
And when we talk about it moving and not correct, it works both ways, right? I mean, if you're gonna move it, does it only have to move easterly? Which I'm not even talking about moving it because it's already locked in, but it's like we only have to move it to the east, which is wise. Doesn't make sense.
Samantha?
It's clearly confusing, right? So let's just make sure everybody understands the difference between a tributary under your zoning bylaw, which is in protection of your water resources, and the difference between what they're talking about, which is their wetland delineations, which are the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. That may be locked in under the DEP through the Conservation Commission and the appeal that didn't go forward. But the tributary, I think, falls under your jurisdiction as to where that line and the edge of the channel is on that tributary that forms the tributary to the drinking water supply. And they're defined differently. So I just want to make sure, because it's confusing about what is what. And there are two different jurisdictions. And it was clear that that Conservation Commission issue of where the wetlands lines were was already apparently dealt with. And now the discussion is about where is the tributary to the water supply, which is, I think, more about what Peter is delineating, which is where the definition is different than the Wetlands Protection Act about what is the edge of the tributary. Correct?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. So that is the issue under debate for you, I think, if we're all under the same understanding about where is the edge of the tributary that falls under your jurisdiction that feeds into the drinking water supply. Not the discussion about where the wetlands lines were placed that already have been decided by the Concom.
So that would apply, in your view, to the entire course of this, from the upper part of the site all the way down through to the lower part?
Well, I think you've got the components consultant, Peter, saying that he found the channel that he feels clearly defines under the definition of tributary. I think these folks, and I did go out there and look at it. It wasn't clear to me. I'm not a hydrogeologist. It's not a site that I would call to be easy. It has been altered. And so because it's been altered, it's an altered system, it's hard for you to determine sometimes exactly where things are. So I think that is the issue here, that it's not an easy system to look at and say, this is the point at which we are going to call the edge of the bank or the channel under the DEP's definition. Now, maybe having Bruce, maybe it seems like Bruce Bout, this guy who works at DEP, if he's got an opinion that one could call independent, maybe that would be the person's opinion that you could take, not through the voices of anybody else, but
Understood.
himself.
All right, how about this? I sent the letter that I sent to you, to Laura, I CC'd Bruce Belk on it. Bruce Belk responded to me, I agree with this. If you'd like, I can forward you the email.
Yeah, certainly wouldn't be bad.
There's a joke at the end of it, so you have to.
You can redact the joke, how's that?
Well, I just want to say, and I clearly think that you are taking this seriously, and you should. This is your drinking water supply you're talking about, and there's a reason that you protect it. And I clearly agree with the discussions about fixing some of the drainage pollution that's coming off of the roads into, and you know, I saw the sediment in the stream channel.
We're going to have
It's
the
not
public
something-
benefit discussion a little later on.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother discussion about
Yes.
the project that is before you in terms of the public benefits, but I would also caution you about making sure that the water that does come down there in its quantity continues to come down, because you want to make sure you don't, you guys are at the limits if your permits are ready. You need that water in the reservoir.
Yep.
And I need it for the fish that we're trying to bring back.
It would get there one way or another, but I agree.
This has to be the most looked at 40-foot
Yeah.
piece of property I've ever seen.
You will send us the DEP's
Yeah,
response?
I'll send you if I had my phone on me, I'd send it to you right now. But I will, I'll send it to, I have your email address, Laura, I think, so I will forward it to you.
Just a couple of thoughts.
Please.
If the planning board did want to have an independent expert hydrogeologist review this stream, for lack of a better word, which is considered a tributary under the zoning bylaw, the part where it would really make any difference to the development is really probably just the part that's the ditch. Once you go south of the ditch, the setback
Right.
doesn't really
Right.
affect anything
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
So it's not like the whole thing would have to be reviewed.
Mhm.
It makes sense to me, I think it's logical, if it's a ditch that was dug to just get water off of Country Way, then you're gonna have banks which are not, which are bigger than where this, tributary actually is. You could have a wide bank, but that wouldn't really reflect where the tributary is. And, I mean, it's thick out there with briars, and it's lumpy to walk, it's not easy to get in there. I've seen the part that I think is the pink part, which is this kind of braided stream, which is also a little difficult to
Yeah,
delineate.
it's a little complicated.
It's a little
there,
confusing.
Which means that there's micro topology and stuff going on that.
Sure.
So anyway, if you want to do this, you really have every right under the subdivision regulations to do it. And you can base your decision, up or down on the development on whether you have complete information to review it. So you can look at it that way if you want to. Or you can decide that, you've heard from a number of experts and, that even though you didn't happen to pay for their expertise, that, you're comfortable.
You can presume that professionals are going to act professionally and tell you the truth.
Yeah, you can do that.
I have a question.
As they see it.
If it turns out to be incorrect, and that line is somewhere else than we anticipate it's supposed to be, and people invade what would normally be the 150-foot buffer zone, I will assume bad things happen as a result of that we would see some point later down the pike. My question is that the kind of harm that could be bonded around? Could an insurance policy be purchased that would ameliorate this at some point later in time if bad things happen? And would that be cheaper than doing what we're talking about now? I don't know the answer to that question, but that's just something that occurs to me.
That line there is really up against the edge of our grading associated with the project. It's along the edge of the grading, so
No, I understand all that, and all I'm saying is if that 150-foot line turns out to be over than we anticipate it's going to be, can a bond be purchased of some sort that will come in and fix the bad things that may happen?
You mean like polluting the town's water supply?
Yeah. You know, all that stuff.
Probably not.
I think I'd be in favor of prevention as opposed
Yeah, I
to
understand.
correction.
But, you know, at some point, I'm just thinking, basically, put your money where your mouth is. If you think you can do it, okay, and if you turn out to be wrong, you all should bear the risk.
Steve?
Yeah, I just want to comment that all the stuff they're doing with the subdivision is under the best management practices. So all the water that's coming from the subdivision itself is all going to be treated. So if they're offering to help with dirty water that's coming off of your streets, I would think that's a tremendous impact to do that. I wouldn't worry about the subdivision itself. You're going to do that through the best management practices. And if they don't work, go to the state. They're the ones that designed them.
But
I don't know that that really answers what.
Yeah,
No,
but
I
I think it also comes down
You're going to
to,
an insurance policy against what? A 500-year
Then let's
storm
go
comes
with
along and
let's
all of a
get it
sudden the
delineated.
town falls apart, he's responsible?
No. Once it's delineated, then the damage or the potential damage source could be known.
now, can you flip back to the blue and the pink lines? The thin blue line? So the way, I guess I want to try to see where I'm trying to frame it. I agree with Laura that the bottom blue line doesn't seem to be in question, seems to be, well, everyone agrees with. It's the pink portion and the upper blue line. What I heard tonight was that we have, conservation who's signing off on that, it's signed off, everyone agrees that's the location where it's at, but that may not be the right jurisdiction for the 150 foot from where we're looking at, from the planning board, is that correct? In the sense of...
Yeah, that's not a tributary, that's a stream. or
Right.
whatever.
So the question comes down tonight is, I guess, as a planning board, whether we feel that we should have our, basically jurisdiction, if you want to call it that, or make sure that we understand where that line is,
Yeah.
as opposed
exactly,
to
yeah.
saying that it was, signed off from conservation and DEP.
Well, to the extent that it's our responsibility to define the
Right.
tributary, then I don't see why we should have a lower standard than the Conservation Commission does in terms of flagging a boundary, right? And marking a boundary. So to the extent that the upper blue line doesn't really reflect what a tributary is, then we should figure out what does. Right?
I don't know.
I'm curious as to why would our analysis and location differ from that of the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to struggle with as well.
Well, they're telling me that-
I walked that whole thing. Pretty much, it was easier to walk down the channel and the upper part than it was to kind of go through the woods. So this area, that's the way I got onto the site, was basically down through here. But as I think I told you before, I saw that this was definitely man-made with piles of basically winnowed out gravel and things that have been piled on the bank. There's no doubt about this area in here. It's a very clearly defined channel. Very, very clearly defined.
Is it a clearly defined tributary?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Under the
Absolutely.
meaning, I'm trying to follow the different definitions here.
It's absolutely tributary to, the definition basically is a man-made channel that's, or not man-made, either natural or man-made channel that it can be intermittent or free-flowing. And this you know, that enters into a Class A water actually under a totally different set of regulations, but that's what this does. So, yeah, it's, you know, I mean, it's clearly, I mean, that's tributary into 310 CMR 22.
But
And is that how that was flagged?
Yeah, I looked
It
at those
is.
flags, yeah. I mean, I basically followed the
I guess
flags.
maybe I'm going to the Conservation Commission at this point. Is that how it was flagged?
Absolutely.
As a tributary?
No, it was flagged as a top of bank.
Top of bank, okay. Is that consistent with the definition of a tributary?
Probably more conservative, wouldn't it be?
It's more conservative.
Yeah, it's more conservative.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the channel would be
Inside the flag,
right.
so it's actually, it is actually more conservative.
That's right.
That's, again, a good line.
Just a question, when the Conservation Commission was reviewing the flags, would the flags have been of the tributary or the BBW? Or, you know, a wetland area that's along?
I can answer that. So when you hit the wetland, they were flagged as top of inland bank to the stream and mean annual high water as it's shown. Above the wetland, as I said, it was a ditch, so it was labeled non-jurisdictional ditch, but that top of bank was delineated with a different color flagging. That's what's shown and has been surveyed on the plan. That bank would be, you know, here with the channel, you know, on the inside of it, and that's what Peter walked.
And I agree with that determination.
The blue mark is top of bank, and the channel of a tributary is inside of the top of bank.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
But Peter, I thought you said earlier, I mean, even if it's a tributary, I thought you said it never actually, that water never really gets to the Tack Factory Pond?
Oh, no, that water
Yeah, it
definitely gets
does.
to Tack Factory Pond.
Okay,
There's no doubt.
maybe I misheard that. I thought you said that,
Groundwater coming out.
Yeah, again, for Zone A, I mean, every drop of water that hits this, that doesn't evaporate, that lands in this site or anywhere on the side of this slope, eventually gets into Tack Factory Pond.
okay, I misheard that, then I
This is
think.
like a main line.
Okay. I just, you know, the upper portion of the pink, I think maybe you were probably talking about oversight or water coming over the, I don't know how to, the right term, yeah, over land.
Overland flow.
Yeah,
There's
that's
overland
where you
flow coming
said.
in, you know, overland flow that's coming down in this direction, there's overland flow that's coming in this direction, you know,
Okay.
and eventually, when you get to the low spot, that's where it flows from.
Right.
It's the overland flow that's not tributary, it's the channel.
That's right.
That's, yeah.
That's right.
That's what I was picking on what you said earlier.
But
yes.
that's all that water is eventually getting into the, you know, even what you want to do is you want to see it go into the ground and kind of filter. But-
Exactly.
So that's why and that's what happens in a lot of the rest of the watershed. This is because it's a main line. You want to have more protection on that.
Okay.
Could it be getting, and part of, I've heard a lot here tonight, what I'm understanding is the bottom half is where the water actually comes out of the ground and starts moving overland.
It also, it's a combination. It's
Well,
a combination,
that's what I was gonna
It's a combination of
say.
surface water and groundwater,
Okay.
you know, as you get down lower.
mix.
And wetlands usually do have, when you're in a real good wetland, you're gonna get contribution.
Sure.
It's called a gaining stream rather than a losing stream. So you're gaining water from the aquifer, or from doesn't have to be an aquifer, from wherever.
Yeah.
And yeah, when the water table drops in the summertime, it turns into a losing stream where surface water will go down into the ground.
Okay, well, my thought is that the bottom half is pretty easy to determine because we have the water coming out of the ground.
Well, and also it's got, you can really see it, there's no doubt about
Okay.
it. Just like you can really see it up here.
And that's what, just hearing again, there was, maybe somebody with a backhoe or somebody saying, I gotta get this water out of
Absolutely.
here. So we have this channel. Is that why this 40 feet or so is difficult to mark, that this part was easy and maybe this is getting the water away from up near Country Way and that pink area is where it kind of spread out and went into the ground?
It definitely flattens out in there,
Okay.
and you know, the slope, I think he said it was like 2 to 5%. When you're up here,
Yeah.
I mean, this slope up here is probably, 10%.
Yeah, no, I mean, I live up on Elm Street, so I drive by here every day, so I haven't walked the site personally, but I'm just thinking if this is just, some old farmer saying, get this water out of here, and that's where he stopped, and then it kind of comes out and hits the undisturbed land.
Eventually,
Doesn't it eventually go into the ground? I know that it
eventually what it
also-
does is that under enough flow, and that's what you can see in
And that's what I was
the
thinking,
grain
is that
size.
we have
is that
almost an overlay kind of
That's right, you
situation.
kind of cut through it.
Okay. So we
And
have-
it's the pink line, oh, I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, no, that's what I wanted to understand, was that we have, I know we're talking about tributaries and streams and everything, but that was my thought, is that we have this drainage water that kind of comes down and then comes over the more natural stream coming out of
That's
the
right.
ground. Okay, all right.
And is the pink line that you've delineated here, is that also top of bank?
It's channel.
So it's not, is it consistent with the blue line that's supposedly top of bank?
Yes, it is, yeah, it's consistent with that.
And that was my thought, that maybe that's where the guy with his tractor stopped, the water came out, spread out, and then that's why we talked about the microchannel.
It does,
We don't have
it
the
does
same
do, it does.
delineation that it would.
It did do that at one point, and eventually over a period of time, this was probably done
That's
whatever.
what- yeah,
And it's
water out of
eventually, you
there.
cut it, you eventually cut a, the water eventually cut a channel through that.
Okay, and then with the water flowing down there, like I said, it kind of overlaps or overlays the other flow of the water down to Tack Factory Pond?
Yes.
Okay.
But you observed a scour channel through that pink zone, and the flagging is on the east side of that scour channel.
That's correct.
Lance?
Mhm.
What's that,
Oh,
Lance?
yeah. Our zoning bylaw, you know, the 150-foot buffer zone was the 520.5, says edge of the tributary, doesn't say anything about scour channel. So it's actually more protective than a DEP definition. And so that's one of the reasons why you want to get a hydrogeologist. You want to determine the extent of the edge of that tributary in order to consider protecting its water quality. The definition that we have in our bylaw was put in there about like 1985 by IEP, incorporated in an engineering firm that pretty much designed our entire Water Resources Protection District bylaw. So when you're talking about finding the edge of the tributary, I think you have to be more conservative. And that's one of the reasons that you get a hydrogeologist out there really determining the edge, the outermost edge of that tributary, not just the scoured little channel that maybe Mr. Dillon is talking about. That's something you want to have determined. Especially if you're talking about water quality and protecting it.
How wide is this scouring? How wide is it?
How wide is it? The channel?
The scouring?
I'd say, depending on where you are in there, probably 2 feet.
So it's not 20 feet?
Oh, God, no.
Mr. Chairman, I just handed out copies of Mr. Dillon's resume. He is a hydrogeologist. He's a published hydrogeologist. And again, he is a lecturer at BC on these sorts of issues. There are samples of his projects there. This is the appropriate professional for this type of job.
So even if you were off, you wouldn't be off 20 feet?
Oh, no. No.
You'd be off 2 feet?
I don't think I'm off at all. But yeah.
Easy now, it's just a ditch.
I know, yeah, it is. It's, to me, it's clear.
Yeah, what's the thinking of the board? Steve?
Well, everything I've heard here tells me that, you know, what we're talking about in the delineation of this blue line and pink line is conservative in terms of the definition of a tributary. So I don't know that it makes any sense to spend a lot more time on it at this point. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it, if that's truly the case, and if we can get some clarification from the DEP.
Yeah. I mean, if we hear from...
It seems to me that we're defining a conservative line here. And if the tributary is another foot or two to the west, well, that's not a problem, right?
Well, that's where I'm headed. I mean, but I'm kind of a purist in the respect that I'm sitting here saying that I like to see things done on a peer review. But But it ends up that a peer review is an expensive proposition, and I get the same level of expertise, I think. Or at least I'm led to believe I get the same level of expertise here, with the exception of the I agree email.
Well, I also hear that this line has been determined by the Conservation Commission. It's been set, and it's been set, and I guess we're just hearing it from Mr. Ives?
Yes.
That it's been set as top of bank, which sounds to me like they've set a conservative line as it applies to the definition of a tributary. Therefore, we've got something that's conservative, not liberal here. And it's been determined by another town board whose responsibility it is.
I agree. Bob, what are your thoughts?
I'm in concurrence with you and Steve. I think that, you know, we're not going to serve any purpose by getting any finer and more detailed than we already have, and I think it's gone through a tremendous amount of scrutiny. And I think, you know, if we are talking a foot one way or another, I'm just not convinced that the difference is going to be discernible in a year or 100 years.
Let me ask the bondsman.
Only have put in 10%. I'm inclined to put confidence in the findings of another town agency. I know that when we make decisions, we want the other agencies in town to agree with what we've already done, and I think they're entitled to deference. I also hear this dead horse beginning to scream. I think it's time to stop beating it.
Richard?
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. I do appreciate the conversations and all the discussions that we've had this evening, though. It certainly clarified, I think, you know, having the experts and understanding exactly the different situations. And I think with having it, like Bill said, with you know, we have a hydrologist here, with that one email from the DEP, that kind of makes it a little bit more third party, if you will, or independent. So that would be, I think, enough to convince me. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I concur with the rest of the board.
Okay. So do we need to take any action to confirm that pink line? Or is that inherent in our going forward?
I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I would defer to your judgment on that issue.
Well, wouldn't that be potentially, we already did the finding of fact, didn't we? I was gonna say, no, we didn't? Would that be, wouldn't that be included in like the
Yeah.
findings of
Yeah,
fact statement
yeah, Yeah,
eventually?
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so we don't need to do anything with it yet, right?
So let's leave the pink line the way it is. Okay. Having resolved the great pink line, let's go on to something else.
Onto the Great Slope.
Great Slope
Yes.
was an excellent next move.
Put them behind us. Again, as a soil evaluator with the state, I've looked at that slope, and it is not my opinion that is a natural slope. I believe it has been man-made, it has been altered. Again, our hydrogeologist, registered soil evaluator as well, has reviewed the same thing and is in concurrence. I think the reason why I'm making the determination is a little bit different than how Peter's making the determination. But basically what I see when I'm out there is I see a very small area that's at the edge of a lawn where the topography grades down to match the existing wooded topography around it. And I'll highlight the slope again on the plan that we're talking about. Right there.
And how big is it?
Nice scale.
Wasn't it about 25 feet? Was it that big?
Between 25 and 30 feet by about 6 feet.
200 square feet.
20 by 6, 180, 200 square feet thereabouts. So, what I see is, again, you'll see where the existing tree line is, and you'll see that this is just inside that existing tree line. If you go out there and walk the site, you'll see that this lawn surface here, you can see based on the contours, this is a terraced lawn, it's a flat lawn. And you'll notice that if you look over here in the natural wooded setting, you'll see that the topography over here is very similar in the fact that the spacing between contours, typically is 15 feet. So it's irregular to have contours over here that are in excess of 3 to 1. To me, that means that's man-made, because I'm looking over here, I see natural contour conditions. I have heavily treed areas over here, heavily treed areas back here, and you look at the spacing between the contours up here, that you don't have any heavy vegetation in that area either. Any vegetation that's growing out of this alleged natural 25% embankment doesn't exceed probably 6 inches in diameter. It's all smaller vegetation. Furthermore, on that embankment, you'll see exposed rocks and cobbles. I don't get that throughout the rest of the site. Throughout the rest of the site, I see leaf litter. I have a very good loam layer on the top on all the test pits that we've dug. The fact that there's some exposed cobbles and rocks to me means that the earth there was turned at some point, or it was pushed there, it was manipulated in some fashion. That's what I see as a soil evaluator evaluating that location. I'll turn it over to Peter for his thoughts on it.
I saw the exact same things that Craig saw. I think my opinion on it is that if you look at the US map, and included in some of the IEP report that was done back in the day, the process basically in that area is till, sometimes thought to be over sand and gravel deposits, although I've never been able to find any underneath that till. The processes of deposition of till would not allow for the shape of that slope. It would be impossible. There's no geologic process that would generate that. In addition to that, as Greg said, there is winnowing at the front where you see some good-sized boulders on the surface. Where you don't see that immediately adjacent to it, and you can, you have a terrace in there that clearly was flattened to me. So the superficial geology just doesn't match it to be anything but man created.
Greg, at one point, didn't you say there were foundations near there, or is that part of the stones?
No, I think in the Van Lenten Crusoe letter that was submitted alleging the 25% natural embankments, they highlighted 2 areas. They highlighted that area there, and then they highlighted an area that was immediately adjacent to the barn that was on the site. And that was more than clearly man-made. This one here is the only one that I felt really needed addressing.
Greg, as I look at the tree line you've got drawn on here, there's a sort of finger of cleared land that terminates at the top of that slope. Is that correct? Am I seeing this right place? Yeah,
This is all it was all maintained lawn as part of the house. It was all maintained lawn.
It's an odd shape. I mean, there was no particular use that you could discern that might have been made out of that just small finger of cut back tree line?
No,
Driveway, storage, nothing like that?
nothing. I mean, the sewer, if you look at the backyard had 2 terraces. The top terrace here was the sewer, the raised septic system. The lower terrace was just grass. It was maintained grass. It wasn't meadow or anything like that.
Any other questions? Public? Lance?
You know, we looked at this plan too, and we also looked at the aerial photo from Google Maps. It seems like it's much further into the woods than Mr. Morse indicates. It doesn't seem like it's at the edge of the lawn. And the other thing too is when we did our investigation of the watershed, we found erratics, we found boulders in areas that there weren't boulders, other boulders near them. I really don't see, you know, overwhelming evidence that this isn't natural. My own property has dips and nooks and crannies and a relatively flat area near it. So I'm opposed to this, that's all I'm just.
Stephen, thoughts?
I think Laura went out. Didn't you go out and look at this at one point in time?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was just a very small area, and,
Right. Was it adjacent to the lawn area and all that?
yeah, it was kind of, the lawn was, you know, as it was described, a flat area, and then it kind of drops down steeply.
And that's
at the edge of the lawn.
that's the drop down that we're talking about, is this slope here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And did you notice a difference in vegetation in the sloped area as opposed to surrounding it?
I mean, it was more sparsely vegetated, I mean, I would say.
Because I think that's kind of significant.
Ran his wheelbarrow down there to dump his leaves.
Well, I mean, you might have done it 100 years ago, but everything around it's been growing for 150 years, or,
Yep.
you know, something like that.
So do we have an issue with the 25%? Disturbed or undisturbed?
I don't.
No, it seems, first of all, relatively small on the overall site, and second of all, it sounds like it was created, ponderance of the evidence says it was created to make the terrace area up there, so I don't have an issue with it either.
Okay. Now, we are well beyond the time frame for this 1 hour that we allocated you guys. I apologize if that disturbs anybody, but I think it was more important to get the pink circle and the pink line resolved. Now, having said that, we'll give you the opportunity to continue at some point. Do we have a suggested time for them?
That's going to be a little interesting.
You here for the Form A, Jeff?
Yeah.
We'll get you before 11.
Incredibly interesting.
Well,
I would think it actually might be, yeah.
the next meeting is really packed. We'll go until about, I don't know, 9:45. So I don't know if you want to, I don't really want to add anything to that meeting. So that would bring us up to November 26th, which is a Tuesday.
Is that before
It's the
Thanksgiving?
Tuesday before
Before
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Now, are you not going to be there?
I think I'm there and leaving the next day. I'm not sure. I should, let me check.
You haven't missed any meetings on this so far, have you? Good. Okay, because if you miss one, you can do that.
I'm leaving on the 25th, so I will not be here.
You will not be here?
I will not be here.
I thought you said the 25th?
Wait,
Yeah.
okay.
The meeting's the
Hold
20
everything.
Meeting's on the 26th, and I'm
Hold
leaving on the
everything.
she said
I'm
22nd.
I misspoke. We've got November 14th at 7:30.
A simple Yahoo will suffice.
Yep.
Do it.
Okay.
Okay with me?
Book 'em, Dano.
Do we have a motion? Or we have an ad lib motion maker?
How convenient. I move to accept the applicant's request to continue the public hearing for the definitive subdivision plan, flexible open space special permit, and scenic road public shade tree hearing for White Ash Farm Lane at 305 Country Way until November 14th, 2013 at 7:30 PM.
Got a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Laura, do you need something signed?
Greg is here.
Oh, great.
You're gonna need more colors next time.
Need a bigger boat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I'm learning more about water every day.
Yeah, but the important thing is that you have to learn it by planning board definitions.
God help us.
I think what I'm walking away with is just the ditch.
A non-jurisdictional ditch.
It's a tributary.
Yeah.
I'm also
It's
astonished.
Scour
you can
Channel.
Make a living with it.
It's a ditch.
Sounds like he's done a few other things.
Okay, we have a
Along the
Form A
way.
plan.
Impressive
We
resolution.
have other stuff.
Yeah, we gotta do Form A for Surfside Road.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So we have two coextensive systems. One's a tributary and the other one is
My point is you're not gonna be off by 20 feet.
No.
You get her approval.
And my point is that most of this is not wanting more than two houses. Mr. Warren, we will have on that land.
That's good to know.
Glad I could be here to speak.
Appreciate that.
I've never seen you exercise such restraint.
Do you get paid by the word, John?
I hope not.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, we never got to his summary of issues, did we?
No, it's a good summary though.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay, the next item is Form A plan. You're up, Jeff.
We're all primed up, ready for you.
Yeah, thank you. It's the property Jeff DeLisi for the applicant, 7 and 9 Surfside Road. A&R plan, the zoning board issued a special permit allowing 50-foot frontage lot, and this plan just memorializes basically what it was. So we have legal frontage, doesn't show a subdivision, and I think that's pretty much it. Pretty straightforward.
Laura, you can comment?
The zoning board approved their 50-foot frontage lot. I had gotten a question about whether the big house was a duplex. I did look that up, and it was not. It's just a single family. Also,
Yeah, this is the big Victorian that you see from the
That's
beach.
this one here.
Right,
Okay.
and then this is a brand-new house, they're 3 or 4 years old,
So this
right
is
on
the frontage
Surfside
over
Road.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, an easement was added to the water for the small house, or the smaller house, which I'm not sure if that's on your plan. We have a,
I see it now.
No, I don't see it.
Isn't that an easement to allow the water to get to the back house?
No, it's a, yeah, exactly. It's basically just a walking path that allows the front owner to access to the
Yeah,
beach.
right.
Exactly.
Good luck with your flood insurance.
yeah,
Yep.
it's just this little.
Oh, I see, it's along that
So
side.
this-
Oh, it
Okay.
didn't show up in our map.
Yeah, it was added
they
after
have
it was
beach
submitted.
access.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Good.
Build some stairs.
Any questions on the board?
We have a motion? Is there a motion?
Where's the motion?
All right.
Can't make this up, you know.
I move to endorse as approved under the subdivision control law, not required, a plan of land 7 and 9 Surfside Road, Scituate, Massachusetts, prepared by Neil J. Murphy for applicant Matthew Murmas and Arnold Friedfertig, dated 8/21/12, as the division of land is not a subdivision because every lot shown on the plan has access and frontage as required by the zoning bylaw on Surfside Road with a special permit approved by the Scituate Zoning Board of Appeals on September 4th, 2012.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. How bad did I butcher Friedfertig?
You actually got it exactly correct.
Okay.
If you were looking up, I smiled.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah.
Next item is the vote to hold a public hearing and proposed zoning bylaw for special town meeting to expand the village business overlay district.
Okay, so the owner of South Shore Auto Parts is the proponent of a zoning change which would take the properties, the Dunkin' Donuts, the Bob Drew's property behind Dunkin' Donuts, which has a welding shop and an overhead door shop. For Dunkin' Donuts.
That's on the left side, so to speak, or is that on the right side? If you're looking at Dunkin' Donuts, which side?
It's the left side.
It's
The
like-
left, yeah. It's actually
Yeah.
kind of-
It's got that little.
Pretty much behind
Private
it.
drive.
Back by where the school buses are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Herringbrook Mall is another part of this proposal. South Shore Auto Parts, and, let's see, I know I'm leaving somebody out there.
The old
Not-
computer place?
There's a
That's
computer
where-
repair
Computer
place.
place is part of it. The Russo property, which is the school bus yard,
Yep.
which is behind there.
Mhm.
But not the
And-
medical building across the road, or is it?
Okay, that's the last one, is
Okay,
the medical
yeah.
building. It's the building that has Harbor Medical, it's kind
Yeah,
of the
the red brick.
squarish,
Yeah.
not the red brick,
No, it's the
The-
funky
The
green one.
yellow and green one,
Oh, the
right?
yellow and green one, that ugly
Yeah.
one.
yeah, that hits you like it's like a diamond shape.
Yeah.
It was better when it was gray, or beige, or whatever.
Kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea is to bring all those into the Village Business Overlay District. And I'll combine my town planner report. I went to the Economic Development Committee meeting last night, and they had a very nice rendering of what South Shore Auto Parts would look like with a mixed-use building on it, that looked not unlike the condos at the Mill Wharf, but, relocated. And it's interesting, it seems to make a lot of sense to take that intersection, which is pretty major intersection in town with the
Yeah.
access to the train and the main
Yeah.
road going down to the harbor, and make that a little more of a meaningful business district.
Absolutely.
So, that's what they want to do. The Economic Development Committee market study is not going to be done before town meeting. I think this is one of their recommendations, is to extend that zoning district in this area, but, the timing is tight. The proponent, I'm not sure what his time frame is, but he's feeling some time pressure, and he wants to really move this forward in the fall town meeting.
And what does that get him with the overlay? What will that allow him to do that he can't do now?
I'm not sure how big his parcel is, but it's 16 units per acre, and then if you provide a public benefit, it can go up to 20.
I see.
And those are condos up above, a mixed use on the first floor,
Mhm.
a retail
Yeah.
use on the first floor.
Does that proposed district or the extension of the existing one include the other side, the burger bar and the dance studio and the
The ice machine.
the ice machine?
It doesn't, and it's too bad, because there are signals that the MBTA has been giving that they want to sell or
A lot,
auction
right.
the bottom part of their parking lot that's on the harbor side, the one that's, really vacant all the time.
Right.
They're
right.
looking to spin that
Right.
off, and it would be great to have the zoning on top of that, but they
We
weren't able
could-
to get that together.
Okay, but we could do that later if we wanted to.
Yeah, yeah.
And
you could
and
do
does
that
it
in
extend
spring.
down far enough to include the site of the small mixed-use building that we were talking about as an adjunct to the residential development?
No, but that one, it both has permission to be there, and it's required that it be there, so, that's gonna be there, and they have all the condos with that, so,
For Riverway, right?
yeah, so that's its own kind of
Okay,
mixed
right, yeah,
use.
Riverway, yeah.
So what was the MBTA lot makes a lot of sense why we can't, because you have to go through all those permits and stuff. But what about the burger bar and the medical building, the I building, the brick
Yeah,
building?
Yeah.
What about those particular
It's
parcels?
a chance to clean up all
The
those
burger-
special permits.
The Burger Bar is actually in it already.
Oh, it is, okay.
And the medical building isn't even in the business
I
district.
know it's a residential zone.
So that needs to really be rezoned business
Okay.
and
Mhm.
put into this village business district,
Okay.
probably, unless there's some other idea for it.
That's not part of what's being proposed here?
No, it's just limited to Herringbrook Mall, Dunkin' Donuts, and then east of that.
And so therefore, are we limited to just
Can we
addressing
expand the
that?
scope?
Fortunately, that's where it's limited because it was a petitioned zoning article.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Okay. So,
But it could certainly be expanded in the spring.
yeah, we could make another article in the spring,
Yeah.
sponsored by the planning board.
Because it makes tremendous amount of sense to come back up and clean up that whole special permitted area.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even running it down 3A.
So because the time of town meeting is so tight, we had to actually go ahead and get it advertised.
Right.
So we've done that, but I think it still would be a good idea for you to vote that you do want to move forward and hold a public hearing and so on.
We have a motion?
I think it's great.
Yeah,
I
it's
support
really-
it 1,000%.
Yep.
Good. Now, your
Then make the
motion.
motion. The question is,
Oh.
do you
Yeah,
guys-
unfortunately, I
Oh.
don't have we don't have a motion for you to read tonight, but
So-
we know you can do it.
I move that we vote to support the zoning changes as the petition that have been filed for inclusion in the,
Okay, we don't, we
We're not-
aren't really looking for you to move to support it yet, but just
Oh.
to,
hearing.
you
Have a-
move to,
Oh.
the planning board is
All
going
right.
to hold.
See what happens when you don't write it down?
yeah, see, I'm like lost.
Could have saved the whole night's work.
So, now, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought again.
Just that you're moving
Moving
that
to-
the planning board intends to hold a public
Okay,
hearing
yes, all right.
and do the preparatory work to have the public hearing on October 24th for this petition zoning change.
So moved. I
Do I
guess
have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Accounting?
I signed the minutes earlier, but, all right. So I move that we pay $205.02 for the legal ad in the Scituate Mariner for advertising the 214 Clap Road Flexible Open Space Subdivision Scenic Road hearing, as well as $190 to Laura Harbottle to attend the Southern New England American Planning Association Conference, October 17th and 18th at the DCU Center in Worcester. And $917.38 to Bills and Thomas for their construction observation for Deer Commons Flexible Open Space Definitive Plan. And one last one, $440 to,
That's already approved.
oh, it's already approved? Oh, yeah, there's signatures. Okay, then never mind. So just those.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Town planner report?
I kind of wrapped that in with some.
Liaison reports?
I have a quick liaison report. Before my accident, I went to the South Shore Coalition, which was really good. I don't know, did you attend this? Unfortunately, I was
No, I
planning on it,
didn't.
and I got hit on the head. They did this, MAPC, which is the South Shore Coalition. They were doing it, this North and South Watershed Association. They were doing a thing about Scituate's water. So I have no idea what actually happened or transpired, but it seemed, I'll pass that down, like a very interesting thing. And so MAPC, we met with those guys and
Should have had Samantha talk to this.
No kidding, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's her expert, or the project she's been really working on.
Yeah. So,
Herringbrook, yeah.
anyway, we talked a little bit all the different towns, we talked with Cohasset and, with the study that they're doing for the 3A corridor study, also the market study that the funds came from for EDC. And, basically, long story short, MAPC said, hey, we're here for you. Please give us your proposals, as you've done in the past. And they were very welcoming and very straightforward. And the other towns all gave little updates. I'm trying to think of anything particular. Probably, like I said, the biggest thing was just the fact of, there was a, Hull, which I think you're familiar with, has done an overlay district to permit sort of more high-rise buildings, or I should say, more dense buildings. And then, of course, Cohasset's doing that 3A study. And then there was a study about the 3A rotary in Hingham, and doing some connections there for that, or changing it to more signalized. So that's kind of the basic.
Yeah.
That sounds like progress backwards.
I know, I don't understand the issue, but I guess there's a lot of accidents there. And maybe, I think the reason they were explaining is that that particular rotary is like, it's confusing whether it's 1 lane or 2 lane. And so I think sometimes there's more than, people think of it as being 2 lanes, and it's not really supposed to be.
It's absolutely 2 lanes.
Well, anyway,
Are you
evidently
kidding
it
me?
causes.
All you need to do is paint a line.
Evidently, it causes accidents, and that was an issue that they're looking at.
There's a rotary just like, well, similar to that in the way it's built, next to the Union Station, train station in Worcester. And they've striped it, and it's
Works
pretty
fine.
self-explanatory, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's strip the wood down in Greenbush and didn't do a whole lot of good.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing Hull was looking at also was just ways that maybe they could connect Nantasket Junction with like some bike or even a shuttle back and forth. So there's some interesting ideas, but actually I thought that Scituate was probably one of the most progressive towns that was there, in my opinion.
Do we have a second for Bob's motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.